Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for scheduling this hearing to consider the nominations of Jennifer Abruzzo for General Counsel of the NLRB and Seema Nanda for Solicitor of Labor. Welcome to both of you, and Ms. Abruzzo, I enjoyed our talk in my office several weeks ago. President Biden called for bipartisanship and unity in his inaugural address, stating, I quote, "This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge, and unity is the path forward," unquote. Yet, while he read that statement, his staff was engaged in an unprecedented firing of government officials. That's not good for the Senate. It's not good for our country. And ultimately, this behavior isn't good for our nation's workers. One of those firings during the president's call for unity was the removal of the NLRB General Counsel, Peter Robb. This was the first time a newly elected president has ever fired the NLRB General Counsel, a Senate-confirmed position that under the National Labor Relations Act serves a 4-year term. Congress set a specific term for the General Counsel to provide integrity and independence in the position. You see, we need both independence and integrity in the General Counsel's office, which we had in Peter Robb until he was abruptly fired by the White House staff while the president was still on the Capitol balcony calling for unity. Just as Congress prizes the independence of the FBI director and the set term for that position, we also prize the General Counsel at NLRB. And just as we view the abrupt firing of an FBI director as shocking and unprecedented, we should also view the firing of the General Counsel with a similar concern. President Biden's actions not only harm the independence of the board and the General Counsel, but this is an aggressive and unnecessary partisan escalation. For example, President Trump left President Obama's General Counsel, Richard Griffin, in office for 10 months until his term expired. President Obama left George W. Bush's General Counsel, Ronald Meisberg, in office for 18 months until he left on his own accord in June 2010, 2 months before his term expired. So while President Biden was reading pretty words about unity, his politically motivated staff escalated the unending partisan war, and as a result, workers and business will suffer, plain and simple. I'd say it ain't so, Joe, but unfortunately, we have the nomination before us, so I know it is. Ms. Abruzzo says she wasn't involved in the firing, but that's frankly a little hard to believe, as she was heavily involved in the agency's review team for labor, which covered the NLRB. I can't imagine this firing was a surprise. Do you? Ms. Abruzzo's fingerprints are on many of LRB's most radical decisions and some of the administration's most partisan post-election labor moves. If confirmed, she'll come in with a dark cloud, quite frankly, over her head. Turning to Seema Nanda, the solicitor of the Department of Labor should be someone with balance, without ideological agendas. But Ms. Nanda is a highly partisan individual. While she has department experience, it was under Tom Perez, who was himself a radical partisan. Ms. Nanda followed Mr. Perez to the DNC, where she was his top executive in charge of fundraising for the Democratic Party. I find it hard to believe that the American people want labor laws enforced by someone whose job it was to raise money for the Democratic Party. She's used her time at the DNC to make a series of inflammatory, aggressive, and narrow-minded tweets and retweets about and against Republicans, some on this committee. She's accused our own committee member, Susan Collins, of not caring about survivors of sexual assault, which is quite frankly offensively false. Susan Collins stands head and shoulders above those slurs against her. Ms. Nanda has accused Republican senators of wanting to, I quote, break the government when it was Democrats who were ruthlessly, break the government, unquote, the government when it was Democrats who ruthlessly filibustered much-needed aid for COVID-19 last year. The list goes on, and I won't abuse this committee by repeating her tweets here. I'm sure she'll offer some form of apology, but I suspect she's simply sorry she got caught. But such rhetoric is in sharp contrast to the bipartisanship the president promised as late as last night, and this committee has shown time and time again. Ms. Nanda seems to view employers not as job creators, but as cartoonish evildoers set upon disadvantaging and harming the American worker. I fear her confirmation would lead to a partisan assault against employers, the great majority of whom are eager to comply with their regulatory obligations and, quite frankly, keep their workers safe. Ms. Nanda's zero-sum mentality of American labor management relations, that in order for the worker to gain, the employer must suffer, is an out-of-the-mainstream view that has no place in American government. I welcome this hearing as an opportunity to understand exactly what this administration and the majority intends to attempt to impose on business and job creators in the coming months and years. Hopefully, instead, they'll set aside their partisanship and ideological agendas and instead work together to protect workers, create jobs, grow our economy, and not government. Since the foundation of the American Federation of Labor, American union members, the actual workers, not their union bosses, have engaged in a struggle against radical socialists who wish to seize control and repurpose the labor movement away from prioritizing the economy and creating jobs to pushing socialism, where government reigns. The AFL founder, Samuel Gompers, only lost one internal election to the socialist faction. Gompers knew our country needed thriving businesses for his members to bargain with and work for. He had no time for socialists who wanted to hijack the labor movement as a means of destroying the very idea of a free market economy. The battle for the soul of labor continues today. The labor of American workers drives our free market economy, and their demand for good jobs and fair wages helps our competitive spirit thrive. But some unions have instead become partisan, masquerading as work advocates. Workers should be protected. They should have their rights to organize or not to organize, and that should be respected under the law. But partisan legislation like the poorly named PRO Act, masquerading as a pro-worker bill, is truly a dagger aimed at the heart of America's free enterprise system. Our two nominees today have fine qualities for their previous jobs. Ms. Abruzzo as a union lawyer and Ms. Nanda as a Democratic Party activist, but they represent the wrong side of the struggle for our soul of the American worker. It's unclear to me that they will ever enjoy the confidence of anyone outside of the biased anti-business bubbles that fester on the fringes of the left, further undermining public confidence in the independent nature of the positions they're here in hopes to hold. I thank the chair. I yield back.